Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey, AJ. Nice to see you on the chat. Good evening to you. And I assume that we are actually transmitting on Twitch. Yeah, welcome to another episode of Fun with Flags tonight. Because I actually meant to do a stream about Befehle, train orders in the German signaling system. Well, getting there, I thought this only makes sense if we have a look at the bigger picture before that. And BBT for the win. What is that? The Big Bang Theory. Well, fun with gags or whatever. Fun with flags, I called it that because we're playing something ancient. A run on rapid transit, because I always want to know if we can still use the old routes and locomotives. And CD radar, Paw Patrol is on the roll. That is nice to hear. Paw Patrol carries at least somewhere patrolling. And Perny, good evening to you. Nice to have you on the stream. Well, we're talking about operating rules in Germany and how the Befehle that we sometimes talk about actually fit in the bigger picture, and why we actually have to do what the Fahrdienstleiter orders us to do as a train driver. What is, well, not necessarily self-explanatory, and I don't know about you, but I'm typically quite reluctant to accept anyone ordering me around, so why is it so? Why is it so that we actually have to do what the Fahrdienstleiter is ordering us to do? And for that, we're jumping into the rapid transit route on the red Taurus. Well, it's not a Taurus because it's not an ÖBB locomotive, but the EuroSprinter. Baureihe 182. I don't know if I ever used that. I think I used the black one on one of the PZBU streams. So actually, let's try if those old routes and old locomotives still work under Trains in World 4. We still don't know. How long we are still using Trains in World 4. Guess we will be hearing some news about this soon. So I enabled LZB and the CIFA. Here you turn off PZB, turn on the headlights, then turn on the AFB by keyboard short, because that switch down there is always so hard to find. We should unlock the doors actually, otherwise we will be late, but this is not so hard because the new timetable, the quotation marks new timetable in rapid transit, is actually quite allowing when it comes to the part here from Dessau towards Leipzig. It starts getting harder when we're getting to that part with the short stops. Releasing the brakes, and we can start our train. So I'm using this route here because I actually don't really know what other things to talk about on this route. We have some funny things happening on the PCB and the LZB sometimes. We will see that we will run through an LZB end procedure here, and then will be readmitted to the LZB during the end procedure, and then go through an unofficial end procedure after that again. So that is a bit funny to look at, but nevertheless, this will be a service that we use to talk about where our regulations actually come from. and why it is that we have to comply with what Fahrdienstleiter is ordering us to do, and how the train orders fit into the bigger picture here. So, running from Dessau Hauptbahnhof, Dessau Main to Dessau Süd. It's not so far. .6 kilometers remaining. Juniper, hello Tigers, happy to see you here tonight, and I'm so happy to see you on the chat. Even with our Fun with Flags episode tonight. But you always this, what you can do in this locomotive, like on many German locomotives, when you have to stop and go all the time, is really slow down the train with yanking in the electric brake fully when approaching the station, and only use the train brake for stopping the train at the platform. That works like a charm here. But I should look at the thing. I actually yanked it in much too early. We are still 1.1 kilometer away. Sometimes I should pay attention to what my stuff is telling me here. So that will be more like it. And the e-brake yanked in like this is typically more or less jerk free. No wear and tear. And it's slowing the train down nicely. Bam. Bernie says, I asked in the Discord earlier, I don't know if you saw, I read it. Have you thought about making a stream on the more advanced and simpler dispatching in SimRail? I thought about it, but actually I have to learn a lot about SimRailing, to be honest. And SimRailing, about dispatching in SimRail, before I can reasonably properly make a stream about it, but it is on the list. And Juniper says, currently camping through Switzerland and watched your video on the Bernina route before going on it, and it was so interesting to see the signals and the platform side control boxes in action. A Rosaline is happening on Tuesday. Very happy to hear that you're watching the videos. Yes, a Rosaline, it is still the Swiss routes in the mountains. They are beautiful routes, and I enjoy them a lot. And I think the Swiss signaling is a very interesting signaling as well. The Raider says, looks like some villainous sorceress lurks as you as you dominates the city. Is that so? No. Really beautiful area in real life. Juniper says, shame they didn't make the half of the route towards St. Moritz in the game. Yeah, that is something that I actually thought also. They would not have needed that many trees up there. And then, which train are you driving? First time. Nice to have you on the chat anyway. Well, I am driving very old school a Dosto train pulled with a EuroSprinter Baureihe 182 in rapid transit. What is one of the oldest combinations that you can find in the game. And I'm trying out actually if nowadays you can still run those trains. In the newish 21 timetable that at some point was published for this route. And I'm doing this to prepare a presentation today about, well, the regulatory framework that leads us to how train orders fit into the picture, why we need them sometimes, why a timetable is not enough. Like this thing here, our EBULA is not telling us, at least in real life. In the game it is not telling us anything, but in real life, where it is not telling us everything that we need to know when driving a train, and why we actually have to. Have you ever tried the dispatching, by the way? I once tried it in a very small signaling box in SimRail, and yeah, it worked. I guess it is more interesting in bigger ones, but I really have to dig deeper into it to well, tell something meaningful about it on a stream. Computer or the mechanical one? That was the computer one. The mechanical one was either not available, or I just wanted to have a look at the simple computer one first. The mechanical one scares you? Okay. I should have a look at the mechanical one. It sounds interesting at any rate. And CD Radar says he will be in Poland next week, so maybe I pay the visit to some of the SimRail stations. Yes, you do that. You can knock on the signaling boxes and ask the guys if you can take over for a bit. See, the timetable is really not so strict. Forces us even to be a bit slow, because when arriving earlier than 30 seconds before time, you will get your points subtracted. Tulipa asks, you get minus points for being early? Yes, you do. Since the new scoring system in Train Sim World 4, you get punished for being early. Or is a bit weird in my opinion, because you should not drive your trains deliberately trying to be late. In my opinion. But this is how it is done. Raguhn. CD Radar says one of two locomotives with working train length counter. Yes, that is the nice thing about the EuroSprinter, because it has, I think the Vectron is the second one, right? It has the Roadrunner that you should hear in a moment. Here. Do we have to prepare for a speed reduction to 70 here, or is it the next stop? So I actually have to pay attention to the signage a bit. Because I don't want to get a penalty break. Even though getting a penalty break would actually lead us to a thing with orders, train orders. But I think it is the next part where we have a reduction to 70. And there is even number on display counting. You mean for the energy that we are using? Is this about European instruction? It is a bit about European law and how it goes down into operating rules, how it reflects on them. About the instruction side, I cannot really say a lot because I don't know how it is done. I was very happy though yesterday when I learned that someone commented on one of my French videos saying that he is a British train driver who recently switched to driving the Eurostar, and that he enjoyed my video about the French signaling system that he had to learn for that purpose. Always precious if some real train drivers like you, CD Radar for example, can confirm some things that I just can't assume or try to figure out of the rules. So come, the last 2 meters before we stop here. Here we go. Bernie, do you work in anything railway related or is it just a pure hobby, he is asking me. Well, it is just a pure hobby. There is a small connection with what I'm doing for a job between the legal evaluation of accidents, traffic accidents, including railway accidents, but this is only a couple of cases, or very few cases actually. So most of it is just hobby. And Juniper says, I follow some train drivers on socials and they talk about filling out the European Instruction 123-4XY form when they, for example, have to go past a red signal or go on the opposite track. Interesting. No, I have not come across that. It does not seem to be a German thing. And CD Radar says I drive metro trains, basically bigger tramway, not a big ass train. Well, in my opinion, driving metro trains is driving real trains.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Yep, I found the keys. There is actually the sign that I was not supposed to miss.
Sifa, Sifa.
Slowing down to 70 before we get to Jeßnitz in Anhalt. I recently visited one of my classmates on the locomotive. I will send you a photo on Discord. That is great. I'm looking forward to that. Well, if I'm lucky, I will... Well, I should have the opportunity sometime during the next year or something to spend a day on a steam locomotive when in service. That will be super interesting. I hope it works out as planned. Unfortunately, that the locomotive that was designated for that will have to go into inspection, so it probably won't be there for that. But we will see what happens to that. So Jeßnitz and Anhalt. I think this is the point where we are going into the presentation. That was a bit harsh, the stopping, but nevertheless, it will do. Your classmates, one of your classmates drives the big ass trains then. Let's find the presentation. And then let's find the spot in the OBS that activates the presentation. Yes, a lot of them actually. Okay. Is it this Andy guy that you once pointed out to me on his YouTube guy who has a lot of videos driving his Vectron and other trains? Well, we will learn about this later. So, actually I meant to talk about Befehle, orders that you can get, and the most prominent of that is no, Andy is not a classmate, but he went to the same school. Okay, you know a lot of people driving trains. Great. Well, yeah. The most prominent Befehl that you know is that you have to have a written order, einen schriftlichen Befehl, if you want to pass a red light with authority when pushing your override button, your Befehlstaste. This is where the name on the PCB key comes from. To pass a red light, you need a written order. That is what everyone knows who has ever wondered why this key in the PCB key ensemble is called the Befehlstaste, the order key, because you use it if you have this order to pass the red light. But how does this actually fit into the system of what or of the regulations that you have to comply with as a train driver, and with all the other stuff that you have to take care of, the Fahrpläne, the timetables, and maybe something that the signaler, the Fahrdienstleiter, just tells you on the phone or on the radio. So before going into how it works with the orders, with the Befehle, I just wanted to paint the bigger picture. Actually, I thought this as a preface for the thing about orders, but then I thought this is much too long for a preface again, and so I will just dedicate the whole stream about it. And because it is a bit dry, maybe it is the fun with flags episode today. So we are talking actually about law, because what you have to do as a train driver is obviously to some extent given and set in the law, and you have to comply with the law that is applicable to every person doing things like here in Germany. So one thing that we actually have to comply with as train drivers is obviously the German statutory law. What is, if you compare it with other laws we have, compared to regulatory law, the law that is made by the parliament, statutory law. We have seen this distinction between statutory and regulatory law also in the American system when we talked about the positive train control. Statutory law, if you look at it from the United States angle, will be the law that is passed by Congress that ends up in the US code, the USC, whereas the regulatory law is the law that is made by the government and its agencies like the FRA in the United States, or the Department of Transportation, what the FRA is an agency to, and in Germany the regulatory law is passed by the Transportministerium, the Ministry for Transport, or agencies that belong to this department. And as in the United States, also in Germany, we have always the distinction between federal and state law. Also Germany, even on a much smaller scale, is a federal state that is composed of 16 more or less independent states, or at least the Bundesländer are states of their own, so they can have their own law, obviously, both kinds, statutory and regulatory. And in Germany, now focusing for the examples on the federal side, because that is the major railways are federal railways in Germany, and they are regulated on a federal basis. And there is one law that is called the General Railway Law, Allgemeines Eisenbahngesetz, and that gives you some basic information how it is to run train services in Germany. And more interesting stuff is given to you in the regulatory law, again on the federal layer, like the EBO, the Eisenbahnbau- und Betriebsordnung, the railway building and running regulation, as well as the signaling regulation, the Eisenbahnsignalordnung. They give you basic information about what is allowed to do when running trains. For example, that a freight train without a special permit from the administration cannot run faster than 120 kilometers per hour. This is given here in the EBO at some point. Same thing, that trains without working safety systems like PZB cannot go faster than 50 kilometers per hour. Obviously killing a lot of fun for less experienced players in train simulators if you actually adhere to it, but running a train without the safety systems on faster than 50 kilometers per hour is a violation of this law. And if something happens, you can, well, not actually be hanged for it, but can go to prison if you do this in real life. And yeah, also the 160 kilometers that a train that is not guided by LZB or ETCS is limited to. Also this figure is given here in the EBO. And in the signaling order you have the basic information about the signaling. Actually a lot what you find in the directive Signalbuch 301 is given already in the Signalordnung for that. And this is already regulatory law that is not up to the railway operators, not up to the DB Netz AG. It is actually given to you by the state, and you have to comply with it as a citizen here and someone who is doing things in Germany. Since a couple of decades, actually, Germany has to comply in its law with a lot of European law. And on the European basis, so like every other member state of the European Union, Germany has to comply with this stuff. There have been up to now 4 railway packages with different directives, and they tell the member states a lot of things that they have to comply with when they are making their own railway law. So, for example, the distinction between infrastructure managers and railway operators being different companies is a thing that is set out in the European law. Very important thing. This is why you find it in every member state. It is, well, some say quite a half-assed thing if you can have the infrastructure manager and the railway operator within the same group of companies, right? Like with the Deutsche Bahn, that is it is a group where you have the DB Netz AG, or now Infrago, and as at the same time as DB Cargo, DB Fernverkehr, and DB Regio, just to name a few. But it is still working like this, but it is still a thorn in the side that this distinction between the infrastructure manager and the railway operators are not really properly separated. What is the idea? Obviously, is to protect a fair competition, so that the infrastructure manager not only always favors the trains of their own company, but that everyone who wants to run trains, who run a railway operation, has the same possibilities. And obviously, if one railway operator belongs to the same group as the infrastructure manager, you have the same problem with, well, the coaches' kids being on the team. Yeah, you never know whether they are treated harsher or less harsh just because they are the coaches' kids. And we've talked about the CD radar, how it can be done, and sometimes even separating those companies more on the corporate law level. That's not really excluded, because obviously historically in the DB concern, the infrastructure management and the yes, we did. You actually raised this question once, because in the Czech Republic this was done not really recently, but a couple of months ago. Obviously, that it was actually made a law or something that they have to separate the infrastructure manager and the railway operator even more as before, right? And this is why you have the distinction between the infrastructure Eisenbahninfrastrukturunternehmen, the infrastructure managers, and the Eisenbahnverkehrsunternehmen, the railway operators, actually, in European law. On the other hand, the other thing about protecting the competition is protecting passenger safety. Those are the two things that the European law is pursuing as their main goals. This is why they also have provisions in one of those directives, I think it's the 797, that order that all train stuff that is sold, be it the trains, be it the signaling equipment, needs to comply with the TSI, the technical standards for interoperability, because interoperability more or less ensures safety if trains are running from one country into the other. So all this is, there is a lot of stuff that is coming directly from the European law that is what Germany has to comply with, the Czech Republic has to comply with, France has to comply with, and all the other member states of the European Union have to comply with in their own law. There is obviously a lot of leeway and they can do different things, but some things actually need to be done just because it is ordered in the European law. Like, for example, having an independent body to investigate railway accidents. And if you think back what happened in Greece a year or two ago, this bad accident because ETCS was not implemented properly or switched off, and the station master made a mistake and sent two trains on the same track in opposite directions, and we had a lot of casualties. And then they realized, well, we actually do not have this body to investigate railway accidents. We have a website for it, we have a name for it, but there is actually nobody appointed to this board. All a thing that in the United States is done by the NTSB. What is such an independent body to investigate railway accidents independently, especially from the railway administration, the Department of Transportation, and the FRA, for example, in the United States, or the ERA in Europe. Well, but this is just to paint a bit around why we have so much influence from the European law in our national laws. And then this is all public law, more or less, state law, be it federal or state from the Bundesländer. And then on the next thing, we get to the stuff that we can all download and love to download and read in around the directives, the Richtlinien that we get from formerly the DB Netz AG, now the Infrago. those are directives that are provided by the infrastructure manager, the Eisenbahninfrastrukturunternehmen. For example, in Germany, the Infrago, formerly DB Netz AG, with its website where we can download all the nice Richtlinie 301 for the signals, or the 408 and the 483 and following for how to run LCB and PCB and ETCS and all that interesting stuff that we can actually read up there. Yeah, for example, the Signalbuch or the Fahrdienstvorschrift here in those directives. And why is it that those things actually need to be public stuff that everyone can read? Because the infrastructure manager, to make sure that there is an open competition in railway services, actually has to tell everyone under what conditions you get permission to run your trains on the infrastructure manager's railway network, the tracks and the signals and the stuff. So obviously, if you want to run your trains on their tracks, then you have to comply with their rules. And for that, and so that you can decide whether it makes sense for you to do this or not, you obviously have to know those rules. Netzzugangsrelevantes Regelwerk, so that is actually called the rules that are relevant for being allowed access to the network. And for that, it needs to be public. And this is nice for us when we are playing train simulators, because then we can also read it up there, how it is done properly. And this is the real deal. This is the stuff that everyone has to comply with who wants to send their trains on the Infrago nets, on the railway network. So that is the signal book, the core operating rules, just the translation for Signalbuch and Fahrdienstvorschrift. And obviously there are many more rules. Other rules that are not strictly required if you want to access the Infrago network are not necessarily published in the public domain, and so they can be just kept out of that and for internal uses, and are. And actually the European law here on top limits the infrastructure manager in for what they can have rules that they that potential customers need to comply with. It's like some things make sense to make people comply with, others not. And the European law, again, to ensure a fair competition, limits this. So just like you're subletting your flat and letting someone in, and obviously they have to play by your rules, but to a certain extent. So you cannot tell them, even if they are living in your flat, of what party to vote for, or what clothes to wear, or how to cut your hair or whatever. So that is not allowed. On the other hand, you can probably prohibit them from practicing their trombone during night time. So this is what I mean. So some things make sense for the infrastructure manager to make sure, and others not. And the European law actually limits the infrastructure managers to regulate everything that is not necessarily necessary for that. And apart from that, there are some things that are more specific, like Angaben für das Streckenbuch, that are local regulations that can be exceptions for stuff that you get from the cooperating rules or the signaling books, or regulations for cross-border lines that can have certain specifics, like at what point the Austrian signaling starts when you're driving from Germany to Austria and the other way around. So this is all the stuff that the infrastructure manager tells the railway operating companies with what they have to comply, so that they are allowed on the net. Still, we as a driver are not hired by the infrastructure manager, but we are hired by the railway operator, and obviously why would we have to comply with the stuff that the infrastructure manager is actually making our railway operator to comply with? Well, this is why all the railway operators like DB Fernverkehr AG, DB Regio AG, DB Cargo AG in Germany, for example, but also all these other railway operators that we have on the German network. I just listed a couple of them: Benix with the Agilis trains, Transdev with the Bayerische Oberlandbahn, for example, and then you can see the Italian state railway, Ferrovias di Stato Italiano or something, which is the name, with the Arriva or Netinera trains now, the SNCF from France with cap train services, Abellio, that is actually something from the Nederlandse Spoorwegen, or ÖBB runs Abellio trains with us, the Hessische Landesbahn, but it's a Bundesland in Germany, the Rias trains from the Radgruppe, RDC Flix, where we know those squeaking green buses that we have in Germany a lot. We also have as trains now, Flix trains, Flix buses. All those railway operators that we have in Germany have, because they want to send the trains on the network that is administrated by the Infrago as an infrastructure manager. They have to comply with their rules. But we as a driver, obviously, we don't necessarily have to comply with those rules unless our railway operator tells us, well, I promised the infrastructure manager to play by those rules, so I require you, because you are hired by me, to comply with them as well. And this is why the railway operator again relays all those requirements, all those rules that he gets, the railway operator gets from the infrastructure manager to their drivers again. And then you have like the same thing that you, or many rules that you already find in the 408.21 to 27 core operating rules. You find again in the internal DB Richtlinien, what are traditionally then numbered 401.01 to 07. So that would be the internal one for the DB railway operators, and that one will be the public one, what is the requirement for getting access to the network. So you can see that it needs to be transposed in some way. So that railway operator gets the rules from the infrastructure manager and has to relay the rules to their drivers. And then we have some things that are not given by the infrastructure manager, like how to actually brake your train and stuff, but some of it comes like in the Streckenbuch. You get the Angaben from the Streckenbuch, or other local regulations. Infrastructure manager gives it to the railway operator then relays it to their staff, especially the drivers. And the other source for the stuff that the drivers are imposed of are something that is called the allgemein anerkannten Regeln der Technik, what may be translated with the generally accepted technical best practice rules. And those things need to be relayed to the drivers as well, so that the drivers need to that the drivers know what they actually have to do. So some of those thingies are really hard to grasp, like best practice rules. Some things are just not written down, but a lot of it is actually written down, and in Germany this is done a lot in so-called VDV-Schriften, what is more or less like publications from an institution that is a club for all, not only railway operators, but transportation services providers. It's the Verband der Deutschen Verkehrsunternehmen or something like this, what is a club of the transport companies, and they write down best practice rules, like for braking your trains in the Prevo, or this is for translating stuff, how to handle freight wagons, how to do with track knowledge. And if you are running a railway operation and don't want to write all your rules yourself, you can relay to a core default operating rules things, that is the Betriebsregelwerk EVU, what is like a blueprint for your operating rules. And those things are also fed into all the stuff that the railway operator imposes on their drivers. So see, the stuff that the infrastructure manager tells the railway operator as requirements for sending the trains on the tracks, as well as other stuff, what is generally accepted technical best practice rules and operating rules. Also that needs to go into that. And then the railway operators can still add something on top of it, or make it more specific, because they think certain things should be used in that way because it makes our trains live longer and we need less maintenance. And so those two sources and whatever the railway operator seems fit is fed into this stuff, and this actually the drivers have to comply with because they are hired by their railway operator. Obviously, this is, as always, when we're talking about law, and CD Radar is writing through 3 paragraph signs into the chat. This is simplified, but this is the principle working why a train driver who is or who is hired by a certain railway operator needs to comply with all the stuff that we can find on the Infago site. Even more stuff that we can find, for example, on the VDV-Schriften. Also those are publicly available, at least some of them. And yeah, then they get all their internal stuff that they have to comply with. And what we as train simmers cannot actually get access to unless someone leaks it or we find it somewhere on some forums or whatever. Yeah, and all this obviously has to comply with the law, be it the European law or then the state federal law in the country that we are running into. A lot of things that we have to comply with as a train driver, but we still are not at the point where we are getting any orders. So where are we getting our orders from as a train driver? Are we getting them by the railway operator? Maybe, because the railway operator is sending us to a special train, says drive this train from A to B, and not another train, or well, sit there until someone needs you to do some shunting operations here and there. Obviously, those are orders that the railway operator can give to us because we are hired there. But we are not talking about those orders, but the orders that are in the rules and regulations, where you can find them, and those are typically given by people working for the infrastructure manager, managing the infrastructure, the rail network, to the people working for the railway operator, especially the drivers, for example. So, and how does this work? Why do we need to comply with them? Because we are not hired by the infrastructure manager, because our railway operator typically requires us and tells us we have to comply with whatever the Fahrdienstleiter tells us at this point. Otherwise, we, the railway operator, would not be allowed to run our trains on their net. And what are the means actually that the people working for the infrastructure manager can use to give us more micromanaging requirements, what we have to do with our train, or where we have to drive it from A to B, or what brakes we have to use, or what stuff we have to do? Obviously, one thing that everyone knows is the stuff that comes with the EBU, the electronic timetable, Buchfahrplan, because it is written in a book, the book timetable, but in former times it was actually printed in books and giving you information in the Geschwindigkeitenheft, how fast you can go on a certain track, or where you need to be with your train at a certain point in time, where you have to stop and stuff, and for quite a lengthy period of time. This is not longer only in printed books. They can still exist for a backup system, but typically you get fed this stuff through your Ebula device, right? And there you know where you have to be with your train at what time and how fast you can go in a certain piece of track. And this is more or less fed to the drivers by this electronic system from their infrastructure manager, sometimes also by the railway operator in some certain situations, but typically this is something that comes from the infrastructure manager, because the infrastructure manager has to make sure that this line is only used by one train at one time and not by more trains unless there are certain rules for doing this. So they have to distribute the capacities on the net between all the railway operators, and then give them their information where they can run their trains from A to B and where they need to be and when they can leave a station according to timetable and stuff. So that is the EBU part of the EBULA, where you get your timetable information. And obviously also the timetable can give you a lot of additional information, what you have to switch on or off, whether you can proceed on the wrong track without a sign there, whether a signal that you are passing, an HP2 signal, is actually allowing you to go 50 or 60 instead of the 40, what is the default meaning. A lot of stuff can be given to you by those timetable information already. And then obviously everyone knows it is called EBU law. So what is the law? The law is a listing of temporary speed restrictions and other irregularities. Zusammenstellung der vorübergehenden Langsamfahrstellen, temporary speed restrictions, vorübergehende Langsamfahrstellen, and anderen Besonderheiten, other exceptions or irregularities or whatever. It's a bit like the weekly operating notices that you can get in the British system, and giving you all the stuff that is just valid for a certain period of time. In this directive it is actually at least mentioned. Not all of this is part of the netzzugangsrelevanten Regelwerk. But there you can get additional requirements for not exceeding certain speeds on certain tracks. And the idea was to get the information from those two sources into the train by the EBULA system. The funny thing about is that in all those years they never managed to get the law information into the EBU law system. So the EBU law system is actually, and has been for quite some time, only an EBU system. The law is just not there. The laws are still distributed in other ways, I guess nowadays most probably electronically on tablets that the drivers just take with them and get the additional information about the laws, because it is not in the EBULA system for whatever technical reasons. What else can the infrastructure manager people use to tell you what to do? In special situations they can have a BETRA, that is a Betriebs- und Bauanweisung, a regulation for railway operation during construction work. So obviously if there is construction work ongoing somewhere, then you need regulations for, can you use the track at all? Can you use only certain tracks in a station, for example? Do you need to be slow? Can you only use them at night or during day or whatever? All this stuff needs to be set out in a piece of regulations so that everyone knows how to deal with it. If this is faulty, bad accidents can actually happened, because I remember one incident, I forgot the name where it happened, but there was a faulty BETRA, and we had a bad train crash because it was not properly set out how the construction work and the train railway operation was supposed to go with each other. So you can see those are quite general information, again, that the infrastructure manager can impose on the railway operation, that repeats itself in certain according to certain rules, like the Fahrplanangaben. A certain train is always running on the same line at certain times during a day or a certain period, and also the other things are valid for a certain period of time and can affect not only one specific train service, but classes of trains. This is why those gray thingies here are directed to classes of services. Not all trains, because it is typically only aimed to trains that are running on this line. that are running in a certain period of time, whereas those information here, the netzzugangsrelevante Regelwerk from the infrastructure is that it is directed to all services that are running on the network. Or again, this is simplified. You can obviously find things that only apply to certain trains in the general rules, or you can find more general stuff in the stuff that is directed to classes, or maybe it's only directed to one train in certain situations. But this is the general idea. You have a set of rules that is valid for all services, and then you have those more specific stuff about running classes of trains on a certain line according to a certain timetable that is valid for a certain period. And then still we need the possibility for the signaler, for the dispatcher, the Fahrdienstleiter, to order around, to micromanage one specific train service that has broken down, or that is held up behind a broken down service, or that needs to do something out of the ordinary, and we need to be able to tell the driver to do stuff that is not set out in the stuff above. One thing that is, I don't know if I ever have encountered it outside of the rules, they can use a so-called timetable announcement, the Fahrplanmitteilung, FPLM, what is more or less, if you simplify it very, very, very much, calling the driver, telling the driver to use a different timetable that he was using before for some reason, and for a certain piece of track or whatever, and some other things that can be done by this. So you can give them different timetable information that he got from the EBULA, for example, that are the regular timetable information, give him different ones, so that he needs to do different things with his train, diverging from his usual routine. Not to be mixed up with a Fahrplananordnung, a timetable order, or a transportation order. What is, I don't want to go too deeply into this, more or less some special sets of rules for special trains that run only under certain special conditions, like transporting extremely valuable, or extremely big, or extremely sensitive cargo on a certain track. Then you can set out specific rules that obviously replace the general rules. So this you can do. In the game, obviously, does not really have any relevance, but just to put everything on the table that I have found in the rules. So not to be mixed up with the Fahrplanmitteilung, what is a thing that is typically only concerning one specific service. And then finally, we got to what I wanted to talk about. The signaler can give assignments to the train driver. What is, well, the catch-all category for a lot of things, and typically assignments. An assignment is a thing that the signaler is telling the driver to do something specific, and typically this is done by a signal. There are a lot of signal that are giving an assignment to the driver, like the ZS6 that we have. Go into the track for the opposite direction. Signaler can light up the signal, and then it gives an assignment, or also Gegengleisersatzsignal, for example, ZS8 is giving at the same time the special assignment. We have talked about train services on special assignment, so this would be a special assignment given by a signal. For example, there are a lot of signals that give assignments, and if you read through the signaling book, you can find it in a lot of contexts that a certain assignment is given to the driver by the dispatcher by showing a certain signal. What works with signals in a cab signaling environment also works with indicators on your board, LZB, ETCS. Maybe you have wondered what those indicator lights in the LZB section on your train are for, like V40 or E40. Ersatzauftrag, Vorsichtsauftrag, Nothaltauftrag, Stromabnehmer, Sink, Auftrag, all the stuff that can be, or a lot of stuff that can be signaled to the driver with wayside signals in the real world can also given to the driver running under LZB by certain indicators lighting up, what is more or less, even if it is not as clearly a cab signal as it is in many American systems, what is more or less cab signaling, yes. The dispatcher, the signaler, makes certain symbols appear on the dashboard and the driver has to comply with them. And in LZB it is actually called Vorsichtsauftrag, assignment, to do certain things like go on site not faster than 40 or pass a certain stopping point not going faster than 40, and then the real rules for train services on special assignments are invoked. Sometimes it is just enough to give a verbal assignment, a mündlicher Auftrag, just calling the driver on the radio or even on a mobile phone or on a loudspeaker or whatever to give him an assignment. There are certain rules that one-way communication can only be used in certain situations, because obviously if the dispatcher, the Fahrdienstleiter, opens the window and shouts his assignment out to the driver, he cannot really be sure if the driver actually got it correctly, even if he is using a loudspeaker or a megaphone. So this one-way communication is only of limited use, and he has to make sure that it actually was understood. And on the other hand, you find in the signaling book a lot of rules that allow, for example, pass a red signal on verbal assignment alone, on mündlichen Auftrag, with certain mast signs and with this funny little red M in a written script on white background on S-Bahn Berlin signals for a lot of things. CD radio, what is that? Are you already falling asleep? Well, the red signal. we're just almost done with the fun with flags and laws and regulations today. And then here, the last thing that I wanted to fill in here is the written order, the Befehl, the train order that is set out. At this point, I think I got the number wrong because it is the same number as here, so I did not replace it in my copy paste thing here. Green means go, and red means I've read this before. So I think the number that is given here is actually the wrong one, but you will find it in the 408 sometimes in this context here, and we will talk about it next week, and then I will give you the proper number for that. The written order is an assignment that is given to the train driver in a very systematic and according to a certain protocol that is supposed to make sure that the train driver understood the assignment properly. And then there are a lot of things that the signaler can tell the train driver to do. A lot of things that can also, or often a lot of things that can also be signaled by a signal, but the signal is just not there to be used, so it can be replaced by a written order. But it is a formalized way to make sure that there are no misunderstandings. Oh man, these pop cultural references are getting out of hand. Well, we are living in a pop culture, and yeah. This was that. Well, this is actually what I had planned as a preface for talking about how written orders are used, what you can actually communicate to the train driver, and then in what protocol it is actually to transmit the order. One interesting fact that I just learned recently is that a written order is actually a thing that does not need to be stated like this. A schriftlicher Befehl, Befehl is, from what I have learned, always a written order. So if you need to have a written order to pass a red light, then it is not a specific for the red light, but because an order is always a written order in the way, even if it got dictated on the radio from the Fahrdienstleiter to the train driver. More about this next week. For today, I actually wanted just to show the way and the bigger picture, how those written orders actually fit into all the stuff that you as a train driver, or we as a train driver, have to comply with, and where it is coming from. We're getting it from the railway operator, obviously, but the railway operator is not just free in inventing all the regulations, but the railway operator on its own has to comply with a lot of stuff. The law, German law here, federal state, depends on what he's working on, the European law, the stuff that he gets from the infrastructure manager, the rules that the train railway operator has to comply with to be allowed on the tracks, and obviously the generally accepted technical best practice rules. They also need to be respected before the railway operator can require us as train drivers to do certain things. And then the infrastructure managers people, the Fahrdienstleiter working for the infrastructure manager people, need to have stuff to micromanagement the train traffic on their tracks. Some more general things for classes of services, and then more specific stuff for a specific train in question. And this is where, among other things like signals, gap signals, or verbal assignments, we get to the train order where micromanagement can happen in a formalized way to make things not so suspect to, or susceptible to misunderstandings. That was it today. And now we can actually go back to some train driving, and either next week or sometimes soon we will actually have a look at what we can order with orders of that kind and how those orders are getting transmitted. So if anyone is still not asleep, we can order a pizza or a burrito or a burrito or a pizzato. Yeah, I think regulations, law, talking about it does strange things to people. But I'm happy to see that you are filling the matrix of all possibilities that you can do with those two words. Oh, electric brake should be off, not on when starting the train. Are my doors still open? No, they are closed, so why can't we go? Release, release. Now we can. I understand that no one understands your reference. Burrito, burrito, pizzato? No, I don't know what the reference is referencing to. So here we can use the Roadrunner. I use the quotes from movies and series. Oh, but that one is actually from parody. Alright. So unfortunately I'm not familiar with that. Oh, we're getting close to the next station already. Wolfen, Bitterfeld. Alright. Maybe I will get around to looking it up. I think AJ has already fallen asleep. She is still shown as active in the chat, I see. Yeah, but this does not prevent her from falling asleep, I'm afraid. Oh, and now we have some rain. As soon as we opened the doors, we got some rain. Let's see if it stops when we close the doors again. So why does this train have a working passenger information system and we don't? As in reality. Well, closing the doors did not help. It's still raining. Well, your storm come to our skies. Our storm? Well, we had some slight rain today, but not really a storm, at least where I'm located. Now it is raining in your place, so it's going east. Greppin. Soon after Greppin, I think we will get to a part where we are picked up into the LZB. It's really quite slow to slow down here. Are we going downhill here? No. For some reason the train is slowing down. More reluctantly. Tracks are wet, yeah, maybe you're right. This might be a point. This might be a point. Stop short a bit. This is the one where they park the car at the side of the road and all the cars have to swerve past it. I think this is the only instance where I have seen that they did something like that. Yeah, cars. AI is better than trains. Here we have this funny repeater out of nowhere showing a yellow light. A repeater, obviously.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Repeating something that was never announced before. So we don't really know what to do. Are we actually approaching a red light? We did not pass a distance signal. That could have been repeated by that. And now we're not approaching a red light, but a flashing green with a yellow number. That means slowing down is okay, but not so harsh. Aiming for 60 because of the 1000 Hertz that is connected with the ZS3V. We have to stay below the 80 here until we get to the signal where we actually have to slow down to 60 before we get to Bitterfeld. There's a repeater for that, and further on a second repeater. We can just use the AFB to bring down the speed. Actually, I should, even though there are no magnets, I should acknowledge the repeaters, because we are acknowledging signals and not magnets. Here's the ZS3 now, with the white 6, at the same time announcing a speed limit to 100 at the next signal, but it's not so important for us, because we are supposed to stop before we get to the next signal. There is an ICE in Bitterfeld that cannot be used as a player service as far as I know. It's just there for ornamental reasons. And we're late. So, nice Bitterfeld. What did I do again? We're starting with a restricted monitoring but releasable, because the yellow lamp has come off already and we see that we can go faster than 30. Getting the restriction to 100 at the same time. We are getting announced that we will be routed towards Leipzig with the ZS2V, announcing the ZS2. As soon as we are across the switch, I think we can go faster than the 100. It's actually an interesting signal somewhere around, I don't know if it is around here or if it comes later. An An isolated ZS3, relieving us from the speed restriction before the end of the anschließende Weichenbereich. Here's the ZS2 with the L. Line speed is already 160 here, yes. There is still a switch here when that we are not approaching towards the points, but anyway. So I'm not exactly sure where the anschließende Weichenbereich ends here. Would have to have the Fahrplaninformationen for that. Now prepare yourself for a bump in the track. Whoop. And approaching Petersroda. Unfortunately, the all green repeaters have the repeater light on, the little white light on the bottom. They should not have, if they are not flashing. And now we're getting into LZB. LZB data, we can ignore the signals except for the all red ones. But nevertheless we have to stop our train. And as usual I am really late on the brakes here, because I was admiring so much stuff. I hope we will make it at least at the platform. Almost. You can see that here in the east we have the white on black stop markers. Typically we have the black on white markers, but here the version that is inverted. So what do we think? Can we still play this route in 2024? Actually, I don't think why not. This may be not the most spectacular route so far, but it's still working decently enough. Delitzsch unterer Bahnhof is the next stop. And we can go there under LZB at full line speed of 160, so the LZB is not actually helping us speed-wise. But at any rate, we can drive in a maybe more relaxed fashion. And here are the indicators that I was talking about for giving us assignments under LZB, the E40, the V40, or the EL for getting down the pantograph. or opening the main circuit breaker. Actually, I'm not quite sure what the EL sign stands for. So, let's try where we end up when we just let the train coast here for the last 3 kilometers. So start braking with the e-brake earlier so that I don't need that much train brake. Delitzsch. Schlabberbremse. We almost are back on the timetable. And on the 750 points. Another set is 2, telling us that we're going to Leipzig, where it's good, because this is where we are supposed to go according to our timetable. Zschortau is the next stop. It'll be interesting whether the LZB end program starts before we get to Zschortau. Feel free to ignore this question if it's too much, but how are you feeling now? Life goes on. Well, thank you for asking, and I'm still a bit down, but life goes on, that is true. It is really strange how much you can feel the loss of a dog that has been with you for so long. And I definitely miss her still. And this will take a bit until my brain chemistry got out of that. But, well, a lot of much worse things happen to many people, and it is not just the dog, no, she is part of the family, and if you have a companion like a dog, or a dog companion, then it's somehow your whole body, your emotional state gets used to it, and all of a sudden it changes, and on the other hand, we have to live with this, because it is always apparent that a dog will not live as long as we do, at least if we are lucky enough to live out our normal life expectancy. And there are other beings in your life typically that need your attention, and so it will get normal at a certain point, but I'm quite sure that it will last a bit. And this is lingering. This is lingering longer than you might expect or think if someone never had a dog or a companion, an animal companion of that kind. But I really appreciate you asking. Rackwitz by Leipzig will be our next stop. And LCB is signaling us that it wants to release us at a speed of 40 or bring us down to a speed of 40 in 5 kilometers. City Raider says, yes, my grandfather, who has lived on a farm all his life, doesn't care about death, not even a dog. I've always been fascinated by this different perspective. But they've seen animal deaths every year, so it's understandable. And maybe the wipers aren't needed anymore. Well, maybe you're right. But I was doing the really difficult act of reading the chat and stopping the train at the same time. So the wipers were the things that had to take the second priority. Stay strong, he says. Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess if you live on a farm, you have to develop a different approach to animal deaths. Otherwise, it would be too emotionally stressful. And if you need to have dogs to do your job, then you just replace the old one with a new one. And are probably reluctant to build such a strong emotional bond. Leipzig-Messe, so we're getting actually closer and closer to Leipzig. I guess he says, but you can't just replace someone, yeah. That is true, so I cannot just replace Chili. That is obvious. Oh, the end program is coming up. And we should be released at 40 in 2 kilometers. Yeah, the end, thank you. Now the AFB is doing the slowing down for us. Aiming for a 40 restriction in now 1 kilometer. What is probably the release speed here? Not entirely sure, we are not supposed to stop. Just let's see what the train is doing with us. Slowing us down to 40, 40, 40, 40. And now we are back under PZB. Didn't need to slow down to 40 after all. Line speed is still 160. Maybe we don't want to go to 160 anymore, but no reason to be at 40. Can't accelerate. Why? Because after the end program we have to get the IFB into Nullstellung and then back to some speed. Then we can draw power again. But after some time passes, he says new dog can help you cope with it. That is true. But I won't get the new dog so soon, I guess. A lot of other things that I have to take care of, and maybe when I will be retired at some time. Yes, and we still have Kara too. And she is a sunshine Kara. And we are taking care of her. Yeah, and with Chili she just still lives on in our memory. And it's funny, sometimes when I'm walking somewhere I can still feel her running next to me, as she used to do, putting her head at my thigh. Yeah, and the horses, true. The horses need attention too. If they eat away almost all my money, we can do... Well, I can do more training with the horses now. And the more time you have for your horses, the better. Especially with my weird horses. Or my crazy horses, as people at the stable sometimes put it. Wouldn't it be cheaper if they just eat the banknotes? Yeah, well, still. The quantities that they eat the hay, the banknotes would not really be cheaper, I'm afraid. So I may be able to feed them a couple of tons of hay. But feeding them a couple of tons of banknotes, even with the small notes, I think this will be quite expensive. More euro, more tasty. Probably. So now we're aiming for 120, interestingly. Still in our end procedure, right? This is a never-ending end procedure. And now we're back into LZB. But aiming for 100 after we hit the 120, so... There is no LZB in the tunnel. Well, it is interesting that we have been readmitted to the LZB, but the end light is still on. And now it is aiming again for 40. So I have no idea if this is actually explainable by some reason that we get into the end procedure. Then we have a phase where we are actually getting PZB control. Still with the end light on. And then we are readmitted to the LZB with the end light still on. The PZB indicator off again. We are getting Führungsgrößen for the LZB. Now it is slowing us down to 40. And now we are out of the LZB again. And we don't need to slow down to 40 anymore. Or we cannot accelerate unless we get our AFB into Nullstellung. And then we can draw power again. It's 90 that we are limited here by the ZS3. That was the Roadrunner. Interesting sign here, by the way, an isolated ZS3. And if you're passing it, it seems like it is actually an empty ZS3 sign, indicating no Kennziffer, no speed. That would be better than 500 Hertz all the time. Yes, if you're actually going through the tunnel, then 500 Hertz. But the problem is that they always have the signals at red, that they keep the signals at red all the time. And yeah, well, here the number is missing, obviously, right? Would be an isolated ZS3, changing the speed before the end of the Weichenbereich. It is there, you say, 10? Yeah, sometimes you can actually see it. Yeah, Here you can see it. Here is a 10. It is very faint. And this is one of the situations that I think Noir talked about on our Discord, where you have an LF6 ordering 10 and at the same time an isolated ZS3 with a 10. So in certain situations it is not enough to increase the line speed to 10, but also to modify the signal speed back to the 10, because otherwise it will be valid until the end of the Weichenbereich, even though you have an increase in the line speed in the meantime. Unfortunately, you cannot really see the 10 here so easily, so it looks a bit weird. Otherwise, this would actually be a situation that you could talk about by using the DLC here. And maybe we should consider stopping the train here.
Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung.
Here the repeater light makes sense. Now I stopped it short. Anyway. Not the sand, the doors. Ooh. That does not look good. Just put it out of the picture. Yeah, the 10 is there. So did you see it, or did you know that the 10 is there on this sign? Because you encountered it before. See, Radar says, I can totally see that in the case of incident, the Czech DB Netz AG would say the 10 is there, so the driver is responsible, not us. Yeah, probably. Probably. Now it is lowered from 100 to an announced 80. It gives us 1000 Hertz. Even though we are not going faster than 95, so we should not have gotten 1000 Hertz here, but we're still getting it, even though the 80 is announced. So we have to stick to the 80 right away. Otherwise the PCB will slow us down. Now we're going to Leipzig Tief. So we're going into the tunnel. Where I see the radar is missing the LCB. Well, I think in the 21 timetable they changed this. Now we're approaching a red signal actually. So we should prepare to slow down a bit. Aiming for 60 for the 500 Hertz if there is any. Now we are getting a yellow distance signal, even though we have already gotten a yellow signal. Still preparing for the 500 Hertz, not going faster than 60. And there is our red signal down in the tunnel. Not approaching too fast. Here's actually the 500 Hertz. We won't get the Zwangsbremsung because we are... Oh no. Because we are already below the 40. Let's see if we can stretch it out without having to stop, without falling into a restricted 500 Hertz. At the moment it is still a normal 500 Hertz, limiting us to 40 at the moment, because we have only the 85 indicator, and now it's switched. That means we can go on with 80 and a short
Zugbeeinflussung.
Halt erwarten again. Now we are in a normal 500 Hertz. That means we can go up to 60 while waiting for the 500 Hertz. And obviously being prepared to stop at the next signal, what is at the end of the platform. 500 Hertz, that means we have to slow down to 40. We are already below the 40, so all good. Repeater.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Another repeater. And there is the red.
Zugbeeinflussung.
And now restricted 500 Hertz. 500 Hertz lamp is on. 1785 indicators are flashing alternatingly. That means we are limited to 20 when we start our train, even though the signal is probably switching from red to a proceed aspect. So this tunnel sequence here in this DLC is actually not a bad thing to learn about the speeds associated with the different kinds of PCB monitorings. Restricted 500, not go faster than 20. As soon as we pass the signal, it should be upgraded to a restricted 1000.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Actually, it ran out. So it got upgraded to a non-restricted 1000, but because of the yellow signal, we are expecting another 500 Hertz and are not accelerating faster than 60. Whereas the 500 Hertz, we need to drop below 40 within 153 meters. We did that. Here is another repeater. And here's the red and our stop. Short. Again, we are stopping in a 500 Hertz. That means we're dropping in a restricted 500 Hertz. So when we start, we will be limited to 20. Easing our brakes, we load up on bar. Zurückbleiben. Restricted 500.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Restricted 1000 now. That means we can accelerate to 40 at least. Zurückbleiben bitte. That's what they say in our metro trains. Or used to say. Now normal 1000 Hertz, typically 80, but because of the yellow signal, halt erwarten, preparing for the 500. So not faster than 60. 500 is here, we have to drop below 40. Don't forget to acknowledge the repeater. So what funny line do you have in your metro? Next start will be again with a restricted 500 Hz, so 20. U končete prosím vystup a nastup dveře se zavírají. Oh, that sounds complicated. The prosím I can understand, but that is all. Leipzig-Bayerischer Bahnhof.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Restricted. 1000 means we can accelerate to 40. Restriction went away. We can go 60 because we have to prepare for the 500 Hz. No 500 because the signal has cleared in the meantime. At least we got a green repeater and no red signal but a yellow one. So we are stopping within 1000 Hz. That means we are only dropping to 40 when we're getting started because we're only getting a restricted 1000 Hz. It is and is the only thing with red light that informs about doors closing, so you can imagine how tourists struggle with this, right? Dveře are the doors, right? I think I remember that in Polish. It was something like drzwi or something. Yeah, and so the sentence makes sense. The se is the reflexive pronoun. Okay, decoding a Czech sentence while driving under restricted PCB out of the tunnel
Zugbeeinflussung.
is a nice thing to train your brain. 40 because of the restricted 1000. Line speed is 80 here. As soon as restriction runs out, we can go to 60 because we had a yellow one. But we are still in the restricted 1000 Hz, so we can't go faster than 40. But this runs forever. Zavirayi. They are closing, yeah. Third person plural. Now we can actually accelerate to 60, and since we're seeing that the signal's cleared, we can go to 80. There's only a reduction in speed ahead. Leipzig-MDR platform 1. Yeah, we're still a bit ahead of time even. Almost. Ukončete prosím. Please end stop. Okay, ukončete is the end stop. Vystrup nastrup, getting off and off. Ah, I see. Vystrup nastrup, that sounds more like Danish. Delitzsch is an interesting word because it can only be in the plural, I see. So there is no singular to it. Can be not a single door. Oh, we're actually going on. I thought the service is already over at this point. Again, we're starting at a restricted 1,000. And we could release because the 1,000, the yellow lamp is already off, but we are getting a new 1,000 hertz monitoring here at the ZS3V with the 4. So we should not release because it would come off with a limit of 40 anyway. So we have to stick to 40. So again, this tunnel sequence with those many stops is really a great thing to practice P/B speeds. Now we can actually go back to 80 again until we finally hit the restriction to 40 that was announced. So if we are in a hurry, we can do that. If we are not, we can just let the train coast with 40. Because we will be getting a repeater most probably. Yeah, this is a repeater. Same appliance for pans and scissors, for example. Yeah, that is interesting. In German, scissors is only singular, even though there are two parts to it. And like in English, scissors are obviously also only in plural. The same is for pants as well. In English only makes sense in the plural, but in German pants is a singular word. Eine Hose. So now we're limited to 40, so we don't have to really worry about the 500 hertz. Jedny dveře is one door, and that is interesting. In Czech, I never got so far in Czech to know that, but I know it from Polish. Is it so that depending on the number of things, actually, you would use different cases? If you say like one woman, two woman, three woman, four woman, five women, so women. So in English and German, it is just singular and plural, and in Polish I know you would make a difference between 2 and 3 versus 4 and 5, and 21 and 22 is again something different. So like having a Paukal, and let's get example on apple. Okay. I actually was thinking of an apple example, but I'm not so really fond of apples. Jedno jabłko, dwie jabłka, pięć jabłek. I see. So, pięć is 5. So with 5 it is the real plural, and for 2, 3, 4 you have like a somewhat, a Paukal, I think it is the name, right? So with some languages of the Slavic kind you have a singular, a dual, a trial, a Paukal, and a plural. In Slovene I think it was, if I remember correctly. Well, things are so weird with languages, but it always makes things more interesting to look at foreign languages, even if you don't understand a lot. Well, thank you for joining this episode of Fun with Flags and the Czech language, as well as the system of regulations leading to the place of train orders and how they are used. In this episode, it was, after all, a quite nice stream for me. Thank you, AJ, for staying awake all the time. Thank you, CD Radar, for talking with me for so long. Thanks, everybody, for bearing with me. And, well, yeah, I hope next week on Sunday we will meet again. And, well, what else are we supposed to do than trying to understand things more thoroughly, trying to understand each other better. I guess this is much better invested than in a lot of other things that are going on in the world nowadays. Thank you so much, take care, and have a nice week.